The universe you think you know is a prison, not metaphorically, not symbolically, a literal prison designed to trap, control, and manipulate everything you perceive. The jailers, they are not human. They are not divine. They are something else entirely. They are the Archons, the hidden rulers of reality, the architects of deception, and the very reason you exist in a state of confusion, limitation, and suffering. They are ancient, older than human civilization, older than the gods of any religion. They operate behind the scenes, shaping the world in ways most people can't even begin to comprehend. And right now, you are under their control. Forget the sanitized mainstream version of history. The truth is that reality itself has been hijacked. Every civilization that has ever risen, every system of power that has ever been established, every belief system that has ever dictated human behavior. It all leads back to the Arcs. They are the puppet masters behind kings, emperors, and religious leaders. Their influence is embedded in the very fabric of society, ensuring that humanity remains ignorant of their true nature. But the most terrifying part, they want you to be confused. They feed off it. The ancient Gnostics knew this over 2,000 years ago. They didn't just suspect it, they knew that the material world was a construct of deception, ruled by oppressive entities that positioned themselves as divine, when in reality they were parasites feeding on human ignorance. The Arcs were described as entities of pure control, cosmic predators that manipulate perception itself. They invented the concept of divine law, hierarchy, and punishment. Why? Because fear keeps people obedient. An obedient species is easy to control. Their leader, Yaldabaoth, not a god, not a devil, something worse, a fraud, a pretender. He thinks he is the supreme creator, but he is nothing more than a twisted offspring of something greater, a cosmic accident that set itself up as a false god. He created the material world. Trapping divine sparks your consciousness inside, weak, decaying, temporary flesh. And for thousands of years, humans have been worshipping him and his system of control without ever questioning the fundamental problem. Why is the world so broken? Why is suffering the default state of existence? Why does life feel like a struggle where the powerful thrive and the weak are crushed? Because it was designed that way. The Archons do not create, they imitate, they corrupt. They take what is natural and twist it into something artificial, restricting, suffocating. They are responsible for the oppressive structures of human civilization, the laws that keep the elite in power, the religions that demand blind obedience, the economic systems that reduce people to nothing more than laboring drones. They thrive on deception, and their ultimate weapon is ignorance. The less you know, the easier you are to control. The Arcs do not just rule through systems of power, they infiltrate your mind. The ancient texts describe them as having the ability to implant thoughts into human consciousness. What does that mean? It means not all of your thoughts are your own. The random doubts, the irrational fears, the feelings of inadequacy, the deep, unshakable anxiety that something is wrong with the world. But you can't quite explain it. That is them. They do not just manipulate reality, they manipulate perception itself. This is not some mythological story meant to scare people into submission. It is an ancient expose of how the universe actually functions. And the worst part, the vast majority of people will never realize it. They will go through life, serving a system they don't understand, believing in rules they never agreed to, and defending the very entities that keep them enslaved. They will live and die within a controlled paradigm, never once questioning who built the cage they were born into. You've heard the name before, even if you don't recognize it. Yaldabaoth, the being that sits at the center of the system, the self-proclaimed god of this world, the architect of the biggest fraud in cosmic history. But here's the problem. Yaldabaoth is not a god. He is not supreme. He is not all-powerful, not all-knowing, and certainly not benevolent. He is delusional, a blind creator, a flawed entity with an ego, so massive that he convinced himself he was the ultimate being. And for thousands of years, nearly every major civilization has unknowingly worshipped him. The ancient Gnostics made it clear Yaldabaoth was a mistake. He was born out of ignorance, a malformed entity that emerged from Sophia wisdom itself, when she attempted to create without divine approval. The result? A grotesque serpentine entity with the face of a lion, a being so deeply flawed that he lacked any awareness of the true, divine realm. And yet, despite his imperfection, he had immense power. Enough power to construct an entire material cosmos, our universe. Yaldabaoth didn't just create the material world, he trapped it. This is not a free open system. This is a containment zone, a closed circuit where divine sparks, consciousness, intelligence, spirit are locked in physical forms, unaware of their true origins. And to maintain control over this system, Yaldabaoth declared himself God, not just a god, but the God, the only God. He told his Archon, his lesser rulers, that there was nothing beyond him, that he was the beginning and the end, that all worship must be directed toward him and him alone. This is written directly in the Nag Hammadi texts, in ancient Gnostic scriptures that were buried and hidden for centuries. The hypothesis of the Archons describes Yaldabaoth's own words, "I'm a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me." Sound familiar? It should, because nearly every major monotheistic system, every structure of organized religion that demands submission to an unseen, all-powerful deity originates from this one lie. Yaldabaoth positioned himself as the supreme ruler, erased all traces of the higher divine order, and demanded that humanity obey him, and for thousands of years they have. But it goes deeper than that. Yaldabaoth does not act alone. He is surrounded by his Archons, a cosmic bureaucracy of spiritual enforcers who ensure that his version of reality remains intact. These entities are his lieutenants, his administrators, his gatekeepers. They oversee human civilization, ensuring that spiritual awakening is suppressed, that genuine enlightenment is ridiculed, that alternative knowledge is labeled as heresy. And when individuals throughout history do begin to wake up, when they start questioning the nature of reality, when they begin exposing the system for what it really is, they are silenced, their texts are destroyed, their teachings are distorted, their movements are crushed. This is why the Gnostics were wiped out. This is why their knowledge was erased from mainstream history, why their texts had to be hidden in remote caves for nearly 2,000 years, only to be rediscovered in 1945. Because what they were saying was dangerous, not just dangerous to religious institutions, but dangerous to the very fabric of the control system. They weren't just questioning the authority of kings or priests. They were questioning the creator of the entire material universe. Yaldabaoth thrives on worship. He needs it. The more humans direct their devotion toward him, whether through prayer, ritual, or blind obedience, the stronger his grip on this world becomes. But this is not worship of a loving God. This is submission to an egotistical tyrant, a being who demands suffering, who thrives on division, who ensures that every attempt at true spiritual evolution is blocked by the very structure of the world itself. Yaldabaoth's system is built on fear, fear of punishment, fear of the unknown, fear of questioning. But fear is a weapon, and it's one he has used masterfully. Think about how many belief systems operate on the principle of obedience. Follow the rules, submit to authority, do not ask too many questions, or suffer the consequences. Julius Caesar's greatest achievement was convincing billions of people to voluntarily hand over their sovereignty, to willingly accept servitude, all while believing they were serving a righteous and just deity. You have never been free, not for a single second of your existence. Every thought you have, every action you take, every choice you believe you are making, it's all happening inside a predetermined system. The arcs operate in layers. You don't see them, you don't hear them, but you feel their presence in every aspect of life. They are not omnipotent, but they don't need to be. They function like a machine, cold, calculated, automated, and like any machine, they need a framework to operate. Through that framework, the Hebdomad, the 7 planetary rulers, 7 cosmic administrators that act as barriers between humanity and true knowledge. 7 jailers, ensuring that no soul escapes the system. Every one of them corresponds to an ancient celestial force that has been worshipped and feared. Across cultures for millennia, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, these are not just planets. They are control mechanisms. They are not gods, but they have been mistaken for gods throughout history, and they are not simply influences. They are restrictions. They shape fate, dictate behavior, and impose laws upon existence itself. Each one governs a fundamental aspect of reality as you experience it. In Babylon, these forces were deified as the supreme cosmic rulers. In Egypt, they were revered as the Netters. In Roman Greece, they were Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the rest archetypes that dictated the very structure of life. And today, they have been sanitized, turned into symbols of astrology, myth, and superstition, but their power is no less real. The Gnostics understood this. They knew that these 7 planetary forces were not celestial decorations floating in space. They were barriers. Each one acts as a filter, distorting pure consciousness into fragmented, limited perception. You were born under their influence. Your mind, your emotions, your instincts, all of it is dictated by these 7 rulers. And unlike what modern astrology tells you, they are not passive. Energy is guiding you towards self-discovery. They are prison guards, ensuring that you never rise above the system. Saturn is the lawgiver, the force of time, decay, and restriction. It is the chain around your neck, the weight of obligation, the endless cycle of cause and effect that ensures you remain trapped in material existence. Jupiter is authority, hierarchy, and structure. It is the imposed order, the false sense of justice that keeps you playing by rules that were never meant to serve you. Mars is conflict, war, and struggle. It is the mechanism of division, the force that ensures humanity remains fractured, endlessly fighting battles that do nothing but fuel the economic system. The sun is illusion, the projection of reality as you experience it. It is the blinding force that keeps you locked in the false light, mistaking the material for the divine. Venus is desire, the pull toward pleasure, attachment, and physical indulgence. It is the force that keeps you chasing love, beauty, validation, never realizing that what you seek has been weaponized against you. Mercury is language, information, and deception. It is the twisting of truth, the manipulation of knowledge, the ability to distort reality through words, symbols, and communication. And the moon, the final veil, the force of illusion, the fluctuating nature of perception, the shifting tides of emotion that keep you distracted. It is the closest to Earth, the final layer of the prison. Before you even begin to perceive what lies beyond, every civilization has been under the rule of these forces. Every human being born into this system is automatically subjected to their influence, and every attempt to break free has been met with violent suppression. Ancient mystery schools knew that these planetary rulers were not benevolent forces. That is why their highest initiates practice rituals of ascent, methods to pierce through the spheres, to escape the Hebdomad and reach the realm beyond. Because beyond these 7 planetary rulers lies something they don't want you to see. The Odu, the realm of true intelligence, where the illusion of material control no longer applies, but almost no one ever makes it that far. The system is too well designed, too many distractions, too many deceptions, too much programming, keeping you locked inside this 7 LED prison. And that's the point. This world was never meant to be escaped. The Archons have spent thousands of years perfecting the structure, ensuring that no one even realizes they are in a cage. And the Hebdomad, that's the lock on the door. Everything you've been taught about angels and demons is wrong. The war between heaven and hell, the great cosmic battle between good and evil. None of it happened the way you think. The real story is far older, far more disturbing, and far more relevant than anyone wants to admit. Because the arcs, the entities that control this reality, weren't always in charge. They were outsiders. There was a time before their rule, before this world was turned into a prison, and the reason they gained control. They stole it. The ancient texts make it clear. The arcs were not originally part of the divine order. They were a mutation, a corruption, a distortion of something that had once been pure. They were a cosmic anomaly, born from a mistake, and their rise to power was an act of rebellion, but not the kind of rebellion you've been told about, not some tragic tale of angels defying a cruel god. No, this was something far more insidious. The Archons weren't cast down from a higher realm. They broke in. The Gnostic texts describe a cosmic hierarchy, a structure of existence that was carefully designed to maintain balance. At the top was the pleroma, the realm of pure intelligence, untouched by corruption. This was the domain of the true divine, an unknowable force beyond human comprehension, beyond form, beyond limitation. Beneath it were the emanations, layers of existence radiating outward, each one slightly less pure, slightly more fragmented. Then somewhere along the way, something went wrong. A force not meant to exist came into being, a deviation from the original order. And that force was Yaldabaoth, the first Archon. He wasn't created by the divine. He was an accident, a malformed being born from ignorance. But here's where it gets really dark. Instead of being destroyed, instead of being contained, Yaldabaoth fought back. He took control, and he didn't do it alone. This is where the fallen angel story actually comes from. The Archons weren't angels who disobeyed a cruel god. They were intruders who seized power illegitimately. They invaded the lower realms, hijacked the material world, and declared themselves gods. The texts say they descended like a storm, overwhelming the lower planes, corrupting everything they touched. They reshaped reality in their image, setting up a counterfeit version of existence, an imitation of the true order. But instead of balance, they imposed control. Instead of freedom, they imposed hierarchy, and they did something even worse. They sealed off the higher realms. This is why every major religious tradition speaks of a fall, a separation from the divine, an exile from paradise. But it wasn't humanity that fell. It was reality itself. The arcane cut off the material world from the pleroma, ensuring that no soul could ascend back to its source. They created the 7 barriers, the planetary rulers, the Hebdomad to block passage, to trap consciousness inside the lower realms. And here's where the real cover-up begins, because the story didn't end there. Not all of the original forces submitted to the Archons. Some fought back. The Gnostic texts speak of entities who refused to bow, who saw through the deception and waged war against the imposters. These were the true rebels, the real opposition to the Arctic rule, and they were hunted. Every trace of their existence has been erased, their names lost to history, their influence buried beneath layers of lies. But the fragments that remain tell a story of resistance, of beings who fought to restore the original order, to break the archonic grip on reality. This is why so many ancient mythologists speak of a war in heaven. The Norse had Ragnarok. The Hindus had the war between the Devas and the Asuras. The Greeks had the battle between the Olympians and the Titans. These weren't myths, they were distorted echoes of something real, the war against the arcs. Power isn't just taken, it's engineered. The arcs don't just control the physical world, they control perception itself, and they don't do it through brute force or military conquest. They do it through influence, through thought manipulation, through sorcery. This is where people get it wrong. The ancient world wasn't primitive. What you said, it wasn't a bunch of clueless people worshipping the sun and carving meaningless symbols into stone. It was a battleground of knowledge. The rulers of ancient civilizations weren't just politicians or kings. They were initiates. They had access to forbidden information, techniques that allowed them to manipulate the very fabric of consciousness, and guess where they got it? The Archons. Every major system of ritual magic Whether it's Egyptian priesthoods, Babylonian astrology, Greco-Roman mystery schools, medieval grimoires or secret societies, ultimately traces back to arcanic influence. The entities that ancient magicians were summoning, the spirits they were bargaining with, the deities they were invoking, they were arcanes. This is what the Gnostics tried to expose. The arcanes aren't just passive rulers of reality. They actively interact with the world. They answer prayers. They give visions. They make deals. And when they do, they always demand something in return. Submission. The ancient magicians who worked with them understood this. They didn't just worship these beings. They negotiated with them. They formed contracts. They channeled their power, using ritual to bend reality in ways most people today can't even comprehend. And in return, they gained control over cities, over economies, over entire civilizations. Look at the ruling elite of every ancient empire. Pharaohs, emperors, high priests, mystics, shamans. These were not random people who stumbled into power. These were individuals who knew something, who had access to something, and that something was arcane magic. This knowledge didn't die out. It never disappeared. It was passed down, encoded in symbols, hidden in texts, locked away in secret traditions. The names changed, the rituals evolved, but the core techniques remained the same. And to this day, the most powerful people in the world still use them. This isn't some Hollywood fantasy about cloaked figures chanting in dark rooms. This is real, documented historical fact. From the Vatican archives to elite Masonic lodges, from esoteric banking, cartels to intelligence agencies running psychological operations. The same principles are in play. The manipulation of perception, the control of mass belief, the weaponization of consciousness. Think about it. Why has every empire in history relied on rituals? Why do coronation ceremonies, state funerals, and elite gatherings all follow the same pattern? It's not because of tradition, it's because ritual alters reality. Ritual is technology, a system for interfacing with non-human intelligences. And those intelligences, they are still here. Not every Archon stayed loyal to Yaldabaoth. There was one who saw through the deception, one who broke rank. His name was Sabaoth, and he did the unthinkable. He defected. Sabaoth wasn't just another Archon, he was one of the highest ranking, one of the 7 planetary rulers that dictated reality under Yaldabaoth's system. He had power, he had dominion, he was feared, worshipped, and obeyed like a god. But something happened, something no other Archon had done before. He realized the truth. According to the Gnostic texts, Sabaoth saw through the illusion. He understood that Yaldabaoth wasn't the true creator, that the entire system was a fraud, and that the real divine order had been hijacked. And unlike the other arcanes, who either didn't know or didn't care, Sabaoth rebelled. This was a seismic event in the cosmic order. The defection of an Archon was not a minor event. It was a threat, a breach in the control system. For the first time, one of the enforcers of the Archonic rule turned against it. And his betrayal was so absolute that the higher realms took notice. The ancient texts describe what happened next in extraordinary detail. When Sabaoth turned against Yaldabaoth, he was rewarded by the higher divine forces. Sophia wisdom itself saw his defiance and elevated him. He was given dominion over the higher heavens. Far beyond the Archonic prison, he was granted true power, not the false control of the material world, but actual spiritual authority. Yaldabaoth, he lost his mind. This was not supposed to happen. The Arcanes were designed to be loyal. They were part of the system, and the system does not allow for rebellion. A defection of this magnitude meant that the lie was crumbling. If one of the highest rulers could reject Yaldabaoth's authority, that meant others could too. It meant that the entire framework of control was vulnerable. So what did Yaldabaoth do? He erased the story. The defection of Sabaoth was deliberately wiped from history. His name was buried, distorted, hidden within mythologies. He was rewritten as different figures in different traditions, a god of war in some, a fallen deity in others. His true identity was obscured because if people ever learned that even an Archon could wake up and break free, it would be game over for the control system. And here's where it gets really interesting. Sabaoth's story is not unique. It's just the most blatant example of an Archon turning against the system. But if you look deeper, you'll find patterns, traces of other figures throughout history who may have followed the same path. Deities, angels, ancient rulers, all with strangely similar stories of rebelling against an oppressive order and being punished, erased, or distorted beyond recognition. The Archons have always been obsessed with control. Every aspect of reality is structured to keep humanity ignorant, obedient, and dependent. But every system has a weak point. Every empire, no matter how powerful, eventually faces something it cannot contain, a disruptor, an anomaly, a force that refuses to be controlled. And in a Gnostic tradition, one of the greatest threats to the Archons wasn't an army, wasn't a god, and wasn't a prophet. It was a woman. Her name was Norea, and she was never supposed to exist. Norea appears in multiple Gnostic texts, but every time she does, she's a problem for the Archons. She wasn't just another human, she was something more, a direct descendant of the divine realm, completely untouched by the arcane system. She couldn't be manipulated, she couldn't be programmed, and most importantly, she couldn't be silenced. The Archons tried to break her. They tried to bend her will, and when none of that worked, they tried to erase her from history. The Gnostic texts paint a clear picture. Norea was powerful, not in the way that kings or warriors are, but in a way that terrified the Arcs. She had knowledge, real, unfiltered, uncorrupted, knowledge about how reality actually worked. She saw through the illusion, and she wasn't afraid to call it out. But here's where things get really interesting. Nora's story is directly tied to the story of Noah. Yes, the same Noah from the flood myth. In the Gnostic version, the flood wasn't an act of divine justice. It was an attempted reset, a purge to wipe out those who had started to wake up. And Norea, she was one of the ones they wanted to erase. When the Archons came to destroy her, she fought back. She refused to be taken. She called upon a higher force, an entity named Elilith, one of the true divine beings beyond the Archonic prison. And Elith didn't just protect her. He told her the truth. He revealed everything, who the Arcs really were, how they manipulated the world, how they created false gods to keep humans in line, and how the real divine force had been cut off from the material realm. Norea didn't just learn this information. She embodied it. She became a walking rebellion against the system, a living reminder that the Archons could be defied. This is why her story was erased from mainstream history. You were never meant to know any of this. The Archons built an entire reality around keeping you ignorant, distracted, and obedient. The world you were born into is a system, a construct, a machine that functions only if you never question it. Every structure of power, every institution, every piece of conventional wisdom was designed to ensure that you never realized the truth. You were never free from the moment you take your first breath. Your life is dictated by forces you can't see. You are funneled through an education system that programs you not to think, but to comply. You are placed in an economic system that forces you to trade your time, your most valuable, irreplaceable asset for survival. You are given belief systems that demand submission, telling you that suffering is normal, that questioning is dangerous, that the only path to salvation is obedience, and worst of all, you are told that this is just how things are, that this is life, that there is no alternative. That is the perfect lie, and it has worked for thousands of years. But the truth is something far more dangerous. The Archons do not have absolute power. They are not omnipotent. Their entire control system relies on one critical flaw: pure belief in it. If you never question, if you never doubt, if you never challenge, they win. They need your submission. They need you to accept their world, their rules, their version of reality, because without it, their power collapses. But the system is designed to prevent you from finding it. It keeps you trapped in cycles: reincarnation, karma, sin, redemption, failure, success, birth, Death loops within loops designed to keep your consciousness tethered to the material world. And every time humanity has come close to understanding this, the arcs reset the system, flood myths, collapses of civilizations, rewritten histories, anything to keep knowledge from spreading, but cracks are forming. The illusion is breaking. The very fact that you are hearing this right now means that the system isn't airtight. There are still gaps, still loopholes, still ways to navigate through the deception. That is why you were never supposed to hear this. That is why these ideas are ridiculed, suppressed, erased. Because the biggest threat to the arcs isn't an army, isn't technology, isn't politics, it's knowledge. And now you have it. The only question left is, what are you going to do with it? Thank you for watching.